When I was about 12 years old, in the pursuit of giving myself some baby hairs, or what Gen Z now call edges, I made a calculated decision. I stood in my mirror, I took a fine-tooth comb, and I parted a section of hair from ear to ear, making sure it was exactly an inch in length all the way along my hairline. I then took a pair of scissors, and I cut this 10-inch section of hair all the way down to 1 inch. Yeah, I thought it was a good idea. I thought it was a genius idea, actually, because I wanted to have these fantastic baby hair designs that all the girls my age were doing. Listen, I don't know, innit? I don't know what was the reason. I couldn't tell you, but I made it make sense. But at some point, I had to actually ask myself, why did I think that was okay? Why did I need to cut my hair that short to give myself edges that I didn't naturally have? Why wasn't I content with my own natural hairline? There was an underlying and unarticulated fear of embarrassment and shame at play, and I needed to understand it. About 4 years ago, a 4-year-old black girl called Ariana went viral on the internet for saying 3 words that brought tears to the eyes of millions. What that little girl said went on to be a catalyst for multi-layered conversations about this topic throughout the African diaspora.
For real, like, I'm not even playing with you. I won't even like kids.
I'm so ugly. What?
Don't say that. Don't say that. Don't say that. You are so pretty. You all, shut up. Go in the room. When you look at yourself, you supposed to say, I'm so pretty. You are so pretty. Do you hear me? You got the prettiest little dimples. You are too cute. No, you gonna make me cry. You're not ugly.
Ariana's innocent declaration was heartbreaking to many. And hearing those words was an unrecognized trigger for so many black women. But it was the sound of that baby's cry, that cry that came pouring from the base of her throat, that made me remember I was Ariana. Like anything else on social media, the speculation about what might have been Ariana's reasons for saying that piled up in all the comment sections on all platforms. Everyone had opinions. But one thing was clear to me: none of these reasons were fact, but all of these reasons were someone's truth. And so many of these reasons were my truth. I remembered my own tears rolling down my face as I hid away in the cloakroom at playtimes as a 5-year-old child, feeling isolated, ashamed, and ugly. Because my understanding was the reason that none of the other children wanted to play with me was because my hair wasn't straight and my skin wasn't white. I want to just quickly mention this word, Sankofa. Sankofa comes from the Ashanti Twi language, which means remember our past to build a better future. In our past, black skin was once considered a pathological symptom. It was an abnormal skin color serving as a foil over normal white skin. So just for clarity, a pathological symptom is an abnormal sign of disease. So in this case, our black skin, the sign of disease, was said to be a covering, concealing underneath it white skin. And the cause of it was said to be congenital leprosy. Another so-called pathological symptom that I want to mention was gender. Black females were said to be irreligious, immoderate, and lustful. And their protruding buttocks and genitals were supposed to be physical evidence of their pathology. This pathologization of African features was simply an outrageous justification for the dehumanization of black people. Just sit with that for a minute. It was said by the white experts at the time, the white medical experts, that African slaves carried parasites and disease in their hair. Therefore, all African slaves went through the humiliating process of having their hair completely shaved off, with razors that were so sharp, their scalps were sometimes left bloody and raw during the process. Slave traders and slave owners would refer to Afro hair as more like animals, and they also claimed that's what makes them inferior to us. A woman by the name of Dr. Joy DeGruy coined the term post-traumatic slave syndrome. Now, this term refers to the multi-generational trauma that black people have experienced since the dawn of the transatlantic slave trade. She concluded that black people in today's society have pathologized our own physical features as a result of our black features being pathologized by the white medical experts who invented most of these narratives through their medical experiments on slaves. The truth is, my enslaved ancestors were completely robbed of their community, their culture, their dignity, and their honor. But for my female enslaved ancestors, they were robbed of their chastity, their virtue, their femininity, their motherhood, and every part of their womanhood. And as a result of that, Ariana is a drop in an ocean of black women who feel or have felt exactly how myself and Ariana did. Ugly. Dr. Joy DeGruy actually authored a book by the name Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome. And in that book, she succinctly describes and gives examples of exactly what it looks like. But I want to share with you an example that goes back to women and the point that I'm trying to make. So there's a 7-year-old black girl with natural Afro hair, which is regularly referred to by her mum as dry, tough, and hard to manage. Her mum has chemically straightened hair because she says it's easier to manage and it looks nicer. It's picture day at school and the young girl approaches her mum and says, "Mum, can I wear my hair down for picture day?" The mum says to the girl, "Don't be silly. You're not white, you know. You're not wearing your hair down. Go and get the comb and the grease and come and let me do your hair in some cane rows." That little girl has heard those sentiments for most of her life, and she continues to hear them. But she goes to school that day feeling bad about herself. She feels ugly. And then later in life, feels ashamed, subconsciously, about her natural hair. That 7-year-old girl was me. Black people, well, for most black people, adaptive behaviors, or what we call survival behaviors, have become so normalized, we don't even recognize them as survival behaviors. They become part of the culture. We even accommodate the language that was used against us by using it on each other to judge and shame each other into maintaining those survival behaviors. Hair's picky, you know. Where's she going with that nappy hair? No. She needs to do something about that child's hair. It's all wrong. But we can't continue to shame each other to change. We must love ourselves and each other into the solutions. I haven't even spoken about racism in today's society or the horrific crimes that actually took place during those centuries of slavery. But I will mention this part. With the rapes of female African slaves came the birth of an estimated 600,000 mixed-race children. And then the onset of colorism began. House slave against field slave, pitting the slaves with the darker skin against the slaves with the lighter skin. The slaves with nappy hair against the slaves with good hair. Slaves who were actually brothers and sisters being fueled with jealousy and hatred between them. After 2, 3, let alone 4 generations of female African slaves being mentally, emotionally, physically, and sexually abused, breaking their bodies and their spirits, this was more than enough to establish the roots of multi-generational trauma. The collective trauma that my ancestors endured made them hypervigilant, so they created survival behaviors to stay alive, to stop themselves from being oppressed and mistreated as much as possible, and to avoid the shame of being considered uncivilized, lazy, inferior, ugly animals. The collective trauma that Black people worldwide experienced when they witnessed the online, widely shared, very public lynching of George Floyd is testimony to the fact that these survival behaviors are so ingrained in our psyche as Black people, we don't even recognize them as survival behaviors because they're merely part of the culture. Let me ask all the Black people in the audience a question right now. Raise your hands if when you walked in this room, you scanned the room to see how many Black people were here. Be honest. I just need everybody else to take a look at the hands. For Black women, or for most Black women, our hair has never been just hair, because it is one of the most defining features about our identity. For most, if not all Black women, our hair is a personal and sensitive topic, because when we are conscious of other people, especially from other races, looking at our hair with facial expressions that signify shock, disgust, or humor, it invokes feelings of discomfort. For most, if not all Black women, we have had to struggle with fitting our hair and our beauty into the box confined by the margins of the European beauty standard, because not fitting into that box aligns with being judged, being considered less than desirable, or being told, directly or indirectly, that we are unattractive. That's the underlying shame and embarrassment. Over the years, the salon chair has become a place for Black women to de-stress, rant about the trials and tribulations of life, and be transformed into a version of ourselves that we could admire for a time. Trust in the hands of another woman to give us what we knew they knew we needed. Being relieved of the responsibility of having to nurture and maintain your own hair. That's been our thing. And that was enough. But is not enough. So many black women have tried the natural hair journey and failed and have gone back to the texturizers and the relaxers because they say natural hair is just too much hard work. They don't want to wear their hair in its natural state. They prefer and crave the longer, straighter, more looser curl types because they feel good about themselves with those looks. And they don't have to maintain their own hair. And I'm not judging them because anyone who's been on the natural hair journey understands and has been through the process and has felt every single part of that too. We hit our glass ceiling. But for those who have been on the journey and have succeeded or continue to persevere, we understand that it's deeply rooted on an internal level. This is not a judgment against black women's feelings towards their hair. It's an invitation to dig a little deeper. Understand when you're feeling those feelings of embarrassment and shame. Find out where they're coming from. Hit your internal glass ceiling and break through it. Many people may be watching this and thinking, get over it. Not everything's related to trauma. It's just hair. And that may be true for you. But for someone else, they just connected the dots. And I invite them to stand back and take a look at the picture that is being presented to them. Because once you understand the trauma and the history and the behavioral patterns, all that's left is to recognize and accept that it's rooted in acceptance. Thank you.